We're bringing in more space stuff, huh? It was George
Yeah,
Takei last week, and now you got a real one.
absolutely. We're delighted to welcome Grant Blaisdell back from Copernic Space. For regular listeners, you remember he was on a couple of months ago and written an interesting article this week. A new wealth frontier emerges, space industry related assets, and it's flipping NFTs. They've cropped up again, James. But Grant, welcome to the show. And what have you been up to since we spoke to you last?
Thanks for having me again, and James deserved to be picked on. I will stand by that. Um,
Everybody's
uh,
picking on
He
me.
always does.
no, all's great. Thanks for having me once again, and look forward to telling you guys a little bit more, obviously, about our progress since we last spoke, and kind of how this new asset class and the application of this technology has even grown in the past couple months since we spoke. So, looking forward to it.
I think the article, I
So
personally think the article was. I was right there the minute you had the not everything is sunshine and apes. I was like, thank you, God.
yeah, because you start the article talking about obviously Bored Ape Yacht Club and all the stuff that's been going on, grabbing the headlines in the NFT world. So what have NFTs got to do with investing in space?
Well, there's two sides to it. There's creation of, uh, let's say, a digital standard for just commercialization in space overall, and turning those into what we call true space assets. And we apply NFTs for that. And then there's the financing end, which can also use NFTs in various ways. And we look at NFTs as not the value or the asset itself, which is kind of how the perception is or how you see it in today's market with a lot of projects. Ours is more of it's used as a vehicle and as an application that provides certain benefits and features for businesses and users alike. So how I began that article, and it's not even commentary on Bored Apes specifically, because that's obviously a very advanced project doing pretty advanced things in the space.
Mm-hmm.
But more so that this NFT market is also going to mature and transition into where just NFTs are used as a backbone of this new digital economy. A lot of people just say Web3. So we feel that we represent this, what you're going to see in the very near future, which is a lot of these NFT projects we're seeing today. The way it's being done today is going to pop in a certain way, right? And certain amounts of projects that are providing real value, usability, technology, utility, et cetera, are going to make it out the other end, right? And you saw something similar in the dot-com boom, for example. So there's it's kind of a repetition of history in various manners around that. So we feel that we represent this next coming age of platforms that really serve as the foundation for the activity in the digital economy. And you can compare that to some of the Web 2 players that came out and are still around and very influential, that came out of the dot-com bubble.
It's interesting you should talk about .com because I was doing some work for a client earlier this week, and we referred to Marie Antoinette, who you may remember. She was the ex-queen of France, and she came out with an interesting statement. Nothing is new but what has been forgotten. If you look at history in the same way you just mentioned .com, and look what happened in .com, and I think it does have some very strong parallels with certainly what's happening in the sort of digital asset space. And so sometimes you can look back in time and actually you get a sneak of what might be coming around the corner at you. But
Well,
I'm
for example, as a musician, what you said, also fits. I view music that way. So it's in the sense of it's very hard for something to really be completely new and original. Pretty much everything has some basis in something else.
yeah. Well,
So, whether it's funny because people like, comparing crypto to the tulip mania in Holland, and I find that to be just very inaccurate comparison. But you can find these historical kind of circles that are happening, and now they're happening much faster, right?
yeah.
They used to happen 100 years apart, et cetera. Now they're happening every couple decades, and I think that speed is only going to increase as technology obviously grows in speed as well.
Okay, so I was interested. You mentioned obviously Morgan Stanley, and they're coming out saying by 2040 the space assets industry, i.e., people investing in spaces, could be worth something like $1 trillion. But just going back to some real practical things that are happening now, what sort of projects are people investing? How can they get access? Because I thought you had to be someone like Richard Branson or Bezos or Tesla, Elon Musk. I thought you had to be super wealthy if you're going to get, or NASA obviously, where they've got the sort of checkbook of Uncle Sam. So how can Joe Bloggs get involved in and what sort of involvement would they get involved in investing in space then?
Well, kind of as I mentioned before, there's two sides of it. So, you can take a look at what we're releasing first is our marketplace end. So you can take a look at, our first major commercial case on it, which we feel sets the kind of the digital commercialization standard for physical payload and cargo in space. So this is for Lunar Outpost Map Rover, which is scheduled to land on the moon, launches on SpaceX, intuitive machine lands it on the moon, on the lunar South Pole. And it's pretty much the first ever private commercial lunar mission.
And hang on, Grant, that's end of this year?
Actually, it'll probably happen in the first half of 2023. Space scheduling tends to be relatively flexible on various parameters, but we're launching the sales around it this year. So in that case, we're using our platform and NFTs to do two things. One is provide an actual market for space companies, the services, products, what we call space assets. In this case, it's physical payload that's going to the moon. So we allow companies or entities to buy physical rights and ownership of that payload so that they can place various types of cargo within it. So we've built a whole interface process that allows Lunar Outpost or whoever's selling these assets to go back and forth, share agreements with this entity, because you can't treat it 100% automated because they need to know what you're trying to put up there, etc. But so
then, hang on, Grant. So is that a bit like me buying a ticket to ride? So I can buy a ticket to sort of take my payload to space in that sense.
Right. So you get your rights and your ownership of it through an NFT. Once the transaction's finished and confirmed, that automatically gets minted and sent to your wallet with related rights, et cetera, embedded in the metadata. And the cool thing, the big value is that's one end of it, but you have an actual asset then, right?
Yep.
And you can then transform that asset to represent your actual cargo, right?
Yep. And
embed further utility, customize it in different ways, and fractionalize it, and then resell it on the retail market, right? So that's the way that, Jonny Fry can have, fractional ownership of something that's legitimately on the moon, and there's certain utilities or access or value that's also provided within the ownership of that asset. And you have a secondary market for it as well, right? So, we, for the first 2 to 3 years, which we think will take about 3 years for us to just kind of be a standard within the economy, we team up with great space companies. Remember, we're a Web3 marketplace, so we only control the entry points. We're non-intermediary around the assets or the transactions. So we team up with great space companies to find a valid commercial case that sets a standard for a vertical in the market. Once again, in this case, physical payload. Execute that like, a Hollywood premiere, a great NFT drop, and create, a new space, a true space asset out of it that also enables the retail market to have access and real economic ownership in space for the first time, right? The financing thing will come next year. That's when we plan to bring that out. So kind of this regulated DeFi applications that enable the retail market to finance space ventures or the creation of space assets.
Okay. And do you see the financing of space assets? Do you see the, if you like, the vehicle you're probably going to use as an NFT, or is that going to be a different type of vehicle?
There's going to be various tokenization models, but NFTs are great is because you can really embed a lot of features tied into rights, et cetera. So We're very NFT driven in how we apply things now, but we'll see how various, we're going to be dealing with security tokens as well, right? So we'll have a variety of tokens we'll be applying eventually.
Right. So some of the stuff's going to be regulated, some's not, but it may come under the label of digital assets, which may be what we now know as security tokens.
No, these will be, majority of this stuff will be securities in what we call the space pool, right? So the space pool is the financing DeFi application. And then we have what we call the space mart for now, which is the marketplace. And that turns these space assets, tokenizes them and turns them into like true space assets. So that's kind of the double-headed monster that we're providing.
Okay. And you also talk in your article about PwC, and they're talking about tokenization or tokenizing space assets such as asteroids and the moon. So this is something which obviously, some of the bigger global entities are now seriously looking at, and no good just staring at the stars. They're looking at how can they capitalize on the stars.
Yeah, we have, it's a lot closer than people think and understand. Once again, there's this big misconception about what the space market really is and what it's doing and what's the actual value that it provides. And when it comes to things like that, we even have use cases that we're starting to work on with partners that are focused around mining rights on the moon and various other types of applications of how to really create a marketplace and an economic model and system for all of these new type of assets that are going to be emerging. That, we even shared on Twitter the other day, just a post where, hey, there's this one planet that is completely covered in diamonds and graphite. It's worth a monetary figure that we don't even understand. If you told that figure to the average person, they don't even know how to picture that in their head. Mm-hmm. So it's, there's something coming that I don't think people realize the magnitude of, not just economically, but as far as like actual benefits and applications on Earth. Like satellite, people don't get how satellite data and imagery is going to change and improve so many things if we really focus in on that.
Okay, and the other thing, we have an expression in the UK where there's muck, there's brass. Where there's rubbish, or you think it's rubbish, is that you can actually make brass, or you can make some cash. And I understand you've been talking to the Deputy President of the United States about clearing up some of the muck, some of the old satellites and some of the old bits and pieces floating around in space at the moment, because that's obviously another challenge. We don't want to go and clutter up the space, because that's going to then start crashing into some of these satellites, which are very valuable for communications and traffic and all the other, and crops and all the rest of the bits and pieces.
So space debris, what you're referencing, and we got Copernic Space. A lot of our early activity, kind of on the ground community work, was in the Lompoc and Vandenberg Space Force Base area. So we're pretty known around there, and we were invited by Kamala Harris and the White House to join her at this event this private gathering she did at Vandenberg Space Force Base, focused around space debris specifically. And Kevin O'Connell, we just announced this formally, but he's worked with us for a while. So this is former director of space commerce at the U.S. Department of Commerce. Also used to work in the vice president's office around space. He just joined Copernic Space, and he has a big focus around space debris and all these companies that are going to be emerging. For example, Steve Wozniak's new company, Privateers, focused around space debris data specifically.
And he's the ex-Apple guy, isn't he? Just for listeners.
Yeah. So the co-founder and actually, the real creator, let's say, of Apple computers as far as technologically. So these companies and this economy needs a new type of what we call economic operating system that is mainly going to be fueled by the wider commercial and retail market, especially when it comes to financing. The way the models are today work the way that they work today, but they're not built for this both commercial as well as capital scalability and access that is needed for the space economy to grow. And something that, generally markets are getting used to, through various applications of fintech and crypto. And, we just view ourselves as the platform that all this economic activity sits on, and facilitate that and provide the tools and features that allow these space companies as well as the average person to benefit from the space economy in various ways.
So instead of being the London Stock Exchange or the New York Stock Exchange or the Polish Stock Exchange, you could be the Space Exchange.
Yeah, in various ways you can look at it that way. It's just we provide, especially through the marketplace, true utility function and features that go beyond just it being an asset class, right? So I mentioned the satellite data aspect. We apply NFTs, for example, in a way to where you'll be able to acquire a license to take X amount of photos. That's an NFT. And through that NFT, you directly access the interface or the API to request satellite imagery to be taken for you and, download it or save it in the ways you deem fit. Yeah. So we're looking really to apply a solution on top of just creating this exchange sort of format of space assets, as you called it.
Right. And again, another good example, we've talked about it several over the last few weeks, about really the national boundaries that we've been brought up and we're used to, and certainly being enforced by regulations in many jurisdictions, that they are very much breaking down when it comes to digital assets. And clearly when you're talking about space assets, then we're not talking about national boundaries, because no one owns space per se. We need something which is very much a different way of thinking about how do we effectively develop, finance, and the rest of the world can benefit from some of the opportunities in space.
Yeah, we've thought about that a lot. My background, Jonny. We've known each other for years, so I've been around kind of regulatory technology, especially around crypto for years before I launched formally Copernic Space. So, you can apply that in various ways now to the space economy. Even though there are technically very few regulations, James and I were going back and forth before the call. He was mentioning the FAA. So there's a few kind of regulatory things that do exist, but I was even with a lawyer with a space-focused lawyer on a call last week, and she was talking about, listen, we're watching you guys because, there's really nothing stopping you guys to push these boundaries in a lot of ways. And also for us as a Web3 platform, as these aren't technically our assets, and we're facilitating, agreements, accepting terms and conditions between parties, we implement whatever legal standards do apply today around space or general business into the platform. So like Lunar Outpost, the Chinese national can't buy fractional ownership of ownership of payload on Lunar Outpost rover, right? They're an American space company. They can't do that. We implement, very smartly within smart contracts and our KYC processes, a way to mitigate that, a way to do that. And not just on the primary sale, but also on the secondary market, which is hosted on our marketplace.
Okay. So Grant, I think that's really important. You're not laying down the rules of who can and cannot do things, but what you can do is give people a tool set to say, if you want certain people or certain countries or certain industries to not, participate both on the initial sale and in any primary transactions, using smart contracts and technology now, that can be laid down in a structure so that it kind of actually does away with a lot of the ongoing, as we would normally call it, verification, compliance, and monitoring, because it's embedded into the code of the contract of what you've actually done. So it should make ongoing costs a lot cheaper for those involved that are using these types of digital assets.
Well, unfortunately, I still need to engage, third parties who specialize, companies like CoinFirm that I helped build previously, that we implement within the platform to work in the system. There's great companies also, such as Lunargistics, which is also applying blockchain to streamline compliance in space, because there's various other stuff happening in the background before it becomes this asset on the marketplace that they need to go through from a regulatory perspective, right? Mm-hmm. So I love what you said, because really we're not there to dictate. We're there to provide the tools and the features that allow these space companies or the users to use the platform as they need.
Brilliant. James, I'm mindful we're sort of coming towards the end of the show. I'm also aware you've been roped in to looking at, getting your rocket outfit on in your local where you live locally, they're looking at potentially doing some sort of space launch pad. So you are au fait with this topic. Any thoughts before we close out this week?
Yeah, and I was gonna say it's funny because I'm talk NFT and crypto all day, and I'm slowly, personally becoming familiar with the space industry, and not even because of Camden where I live. It was initially another project that wanted to go out, and then I believe they're going to, explore the amount of space junk that is out there to try to get a grasp of how to clean it up. And, like Grant was saying, there's a lot of projects out there, and they're all interested in similar aspects and goals. What I'm hearing here, which is great for what I'm talking about, because so I'm here, everybody knows I live in Camden County, Georgia, which is the river that separates Florida from Georgia, pretty much Florida. And we have the FAA license to build out one of what would be 3 vertical launch sites over here on the East Coast. And I'm active in it because of my role in the community, politically wise and knowledge wise. So they've asked me to take that on a little bit. And I'm like, I don't know anything about space other than, my personal info. So what I'm learning here from Grant, though, it's that what I'm getting out of this is you don't have to be a billionaire, right? So you and I, Jonny, and my son, we could almost crowdfund a specific request via an NFT, maybe for, like you said, satellite imagery. And correct me if I'm wrong, stop me. So I said to Camden County, hey guys, let's put together, whatever the X fee is, but it's not $1 billion, right? We know it's going to be on a marketplace as an NFT, and let's have Grant's company take a satellite image of our new vertical spaceport for marketing purposes. That's something that's within our reach soon. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's cool that you said that. That I'm very use case driven. So we have a guy on our advisory board, Bobby, who's a data focused guy from space, and he was just we're really big about proving and showing the wider commercial market for space on this like very fast, streamlined B2B, B2C level. So one thing he was like, I do music as well, and I have a concert agency. And he was like, well, why don't we, wouldn't festivals want satellite pictures of their stuff? And you mentioned, what you just said right there, which actually kind of fits that model. So it's cool that you say that. The other thing is, just so you understand, how it can be applied in various ways. I'm literally going to read this off of our Discord chat where some member asked, what would you guys want to send to the moon? Because in that lunar outpost case, we do actually allow you to send something physically to the moon. And this guy said, I'd want to send anything Minnesota Vikings, right? I'm a Detroit Lions fan, so I gave him a little crap for that. But I told him, because he's like, okay, well, I don't even know how to go about doing this. Well, you can put in like a Vikings fan micro DAO, like a little DAO. Everybody puts together to fund a moon trip of something physical, to the moon for the Vikings, then just transform that NFT to represent your physical, cargo and fractionalize it. And then you can, resell it to the wider market or Viking fandom, right? Like there's lots of different economic models you can play around with and apply when it comes to how we're building this platform and allowing people to access and do things in space. So,
I mean, the marketing alone, right? The Vikings would be all over that. They'd wind up having it on one of their games. Hey, we're up in the moon.
Yeah. Listen, really our biggest, other than, just capacity and things like that as a company and executing everything we have planned or can do, et cetera, the biggest struggle that we face is really education and communication, right? It's like no one's ever came up to somebody and be like, hey, you want to go to the moon? Like literally, go to the moon. As we mentioned, this is really the first kind of commercial lunar case that exists in that manner. So, the guys at Lunar Outpost, along with us, are doing something that's quite revolutionary. And there's a lot of revolutionary things that become very normal within a short amount of time. It's not the easiest thing to for people to swallow right away. So but people are getting it more and more. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the call, even the past couple months since we spoke, the awareness, the activity that's happening in this combination of like Web3 accessibility to space, et cetera, is absolutely mind blowing. And, we were right, so to say.
I think that's great. Jonny, yeah. The education of it, even like what I'm dealing with the spaceport here, not even about crypto or NFTs, but the education of going up in space, why it needs to be in space, what you can do in space, and how it benefits the Earth is key. So I applaud you for that. Yeah. And Jonny, I applaud you for even knowing him.
All right. Well, look, Grant, thank you very much for coming back on the Digital Bytes show. And good luck. I'm sure we'll get you back probably after the summer to give you an update. And obviously let me know when you're next in London. Because you're in Poland today, aren't you?
Today,
all over the place.
Correct.
Well, let me know when you're in London. We're going to have a beer. It'd be nice to catch up with you.
I'd love to do it. I miss London a little bit, to be honest.
Good. And I love the fact that your mum's involved, and she's Lady Rocket, which is
she actually just landed here the other day to meet my grandson, newborn, and she's actually asleep pretty much behind me in my office.
Is she Granny Rocket?
Yeah, she's Granny Rocket now.
Oh, good stuff. All right. Well, thanks very much indeed for coming on. And James, that's another show. Thanks for getting things organised. And Grant, before we go, sorry, I did mean to say, if anyone wants any more information about some of the stuff you're doing, what's the best way to contact you on LinkedIn or?
At Copernic Space on Twitter, COPERNIC space on Twitter, LinkedIn, and go to our website, copernicspace.com, and sign up for the wait list for the first lunar asset.
Fantastic. There you go. So if you want to send something up into rocket, maybe, I don't know, maybe your best friend or maybe your ex-wife, you want to send her up there, who knows? James, I wouldn't mind sending you up there. You could be the first man in space to sort of this heavy rock dude.
I'm ready. Send me. Let's go. Fly me to the moon.
Literally. Okay. All right. Well, thanks again, Grant. Thanks, James. And that's another week of Digital Bytes. And we'll be back on the air, James and I, next week with a new guest and more updates on what's happening in sort of blockchain and digital asset sectors.